The president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. Those were the words of Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor about today's Supreme Court decision, giving what the press described as partial immunity to Donald Trump and any future presidents for crimes they may commit in office. But the reality is much deeper and much darker than that. I just interviewed the legal scholar Kim Wehle, who's a former U.S. attorney who explains rulings like this on ABC News. And she ran down the stark reality of what this ruling could mean and why, if he ever gets back into office, Donald Trump would use it to try to make himself a king and run right over all of our fundamental rights and freedoms. Take a look.
I think given what the court has been doing on other fronts, affirmative action, abortion, of course, so massive power grabs across the board, more this term. So I'm not surprised, although they did, even for me, Matt, go further than I thought they would. Basically anoints the president a king.
Is this a case of motivated reasoning where the court has gone out of its way to reach a predetermined conclusion and seems to really be putting their thumb on the scale to help Trump?
Yeah, I do agree with that. A few years ago, when the last three justices under Trump were put on the court, we heard Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Kavanaugh in their confirmation hearings talk about this allegedly conservative judicial philosophy of textualism and originalism, where you tether your decision-making to the text of the Constitution. There is no criminal immunity in the Constitution for presidents. The framers did not put it in there. Here we have these allegedly conservative justices manufacturing a new protection under Article 2 that the framers didn't put in there. The Constitution makes clear you can prosecute presidents. Because it's so intellectually dishonest and actually contrary to what they frankly duped the public into believing conservative justices do, I don't think there's any other way to read this other than political. In Trump's Project 2025 900-page manifesto, they promised to use the Justice Department to prosecute political rivals, could be prosecuting members of the press that criticize the president. The Supreme Court majority has now green-lighted that. It's just mind-blowing. So it's not even consistent with democratic principles. It really, Matt, looks almost MAGA.
It feels like they've opened the door to the following scenario, where Judge Tanya Chutkan takes this case back and says, okay, these areas can be prosecuted and these can't. The prosecution goes forward. You could even reach a guilty verdict. And now the Trump legal team could appeal that verdict on the grounds that, nope, Trump should have been held immune in the first place for the charges brought against him. In other words, like, the Supreme Court is not only whacking the prosecution upside the head, they're giving themselves another bite at the apple to get Trump a get out of jail free card in the future.
I actually think it's a little bit worse. The court makes clear that intent or motivation behind official acts is irrelevant. If you talk to your attorney general about investigating and prosecuting the former occupant of the White House, that is, and his family, who is from another party, it's irrelevant whether you're doing it for corrupt purposes or not. The test is just you happen to be president. So long as you're doing that's protected. We don't care why you're doing it. If you're doing it corruptly or if you're doing it to secure your own power, we don't care. Trump's going to say, listen, we don't care about intent. Everything I did, I was technically doing while I was still in the Oval Office. It wasn't January 20th. I was still president. So it's all protected.
Has the Supreme Court basically given politicians a license to crime?
They're saying first and foremost, and this goes to Dobbs and this goes to the Second Amendment, they're saying we're the boss of everything. We decide what's okay for presidents to do. We decide what's not. We decide what prosecutors can and can't do. In overruling that Chevron case that I've been teaching now for many years, they basically said, we're the ultimate regulators. We're going to decide what Congress can and cannot give to agency regulators. We're going to decide everything. We are the kings and queens, actually. And as kings and queens, we're going to amend the Constitution to say presidents need unlimited power. You mentioned my book coming out in September on the pardon power. If the president hands out pardons to people who will commit crimes for him, to members of the federal treasury who agreed to basically siphon tax dollars to personal banks accounts for the president and offshore bank holdings and says, I will pardon you for stealing billions of dollars from the federal treasury for me. That is an official act of the president, so it would be immune from prosecution. The Supreme Court is rewarding felonies. I'll tell you, Matt, what I really worry about. I worry about prosecutions and intimidation of regular people and the media. All of a sudden, your tax returns are being audited. All of a sudden, there's some kind of charge against your mother. This happens in authoritarian, allegedly on paper democracies where people are worried about engaging in public debate or speech because there'll be retaliation.